So there is a three-step plan in place right now for Donald Trump if he wins in November to govern as an autocrat. The first part is, as you all know, the Supreme Court has ruled that a president can no longer be bound by criminal statutes, meaning Trump could commit criminal acts in office, claim that they're official acts, and face no consequences as a result. Meaning if he wants to silence his critics, assassinate his opponents, round up vulnerable communities into concentration camps, send the military into blue states, blue cities, whatever it is, he will no longer be bound by the confines of law or the Constitution. He would effectively be able to serve as a dictator. With that said, Trump can't do all of this alone. He needs allies who can help him, but those people wouldn't be protected by the sweeping presidential immunity that Trump would be protected by, and they would have a lot of legal exposure, which brings me to part two. Trump can issue pardons, and also, thanks to the Supreme Court ruling, we now know that they can't be challenged, even if they're given corruptly. It doesn't matter. They are untouchable now. So not only could Trump do whatever he wants, he can amass an army of loyalists who will be able to help him, and they would face no accountability whatsoever. Now, in terms of amassing that army, that brings me to the final part, part three. You've heard of Project 2025. It is the Trump agenda that Trump himself is now desperately trying to run away from, but which was authored by over 200 members of his first administration and which Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts has admitted would be enacted by Donald Trump. Within that project is a plan to fire as many as 50,000 government workers and replace them with Trump loyalists who will carry out his agenda without any friction. Donald Trump's plan is to revive a 2020 executive order that he himself put forward that was called Schedule F, that sought to reclassify tens of thousands of federal workers as political appointees, which would then allow for mass dismissals, and they would be replaced by, you guessed it, Trump loyalists. So the move was ultimately nullified by Joe Biden when he took office, but Trump's already signaled that his intent is to revisit this if he wins. That would mean, for example, that the DOJ wouldn't be staffed by career prosecutors whose oath is to the Constitution. It would be staffed by Donald Trump's acolytes who would be in charge of whether or not to prosecute conservative politicians who break the law, who would be in charge of whether to continue combating the spread of disinformation by foreign actors, who would be in charge of whether or not to prosecute those who distribute abortion pills by mail. The entire federal legal apparatus in the United States would become a branch of the Republican Party and the Trump administration. And if there's any doubt about how real this is, the threat of this is, consider the fact that the Biden administration has actually issued a new rule to make it harder to fire federal employees by barring career civil servants from being reclassified as political appointees. They wouldn't do this unless they realized that the threat was real. But a government rule, of course, is only as strong as the willingness of our government to actually abide by it. If all of the bulwarks to this kind of overreach become Trump loyalists, then the rule is as good as gone. All of which is to say, we are witnessing a top-down effort by the Supreme Court, by the authors of Project 2025, and by Donald Trump himself to remake the government in their mold to be able to enact their draconian agenda in any way they seem fit, no matter how brutal, how illegal, or how unconstitutional it may be. There will be no barrier, legal or otherwise, to what they will do, which underscores the importance of making sure that we do the work on our end. And right now, I know there's a lot of consternation about Joe Biden, but I will say this. I don't know who's going to be at the top of the ticket. I can't predict the future, and anything can happen in politics in the year 2024. But whoever it is, whether it's Joe Biden or Kamala or anyone else, just know that this election is not about any one specific person. It is about democracy versus autocracy. And regardless of what issue it is that animates you, whether it's abortion or climate or workers' rights or LGBT rights or gun safety, whatever it is, the only way we have any progress on any of those issues is if we have a functioning democracy first. That is foundational. So, look, I get that the media is obsessed with Democrats in disarray, and that issue is going to consume the news, at least for the immediate future. But I'm focused on the bigger threat right in front of us, and that is ensuring that everybody knows what's at stake if Donald Trump gets anywhere near the levers of power again.
We need to talk about it. Project 2025. What is it? Who wrote it? Where did it come from? The entire far-right blueprint is 920 pages and 30 chapters. You're not going to read all that. I don't expect you to. And if you haven't even heard of Project 2025, that's okay too. But you do need to know what's in it because it's pretty terrifying. Think a playbook for Handmaid's Tale, essentially turning the US into Gilead. I've looked for some good, easy explanations of Project 2025, and there really aren't that many. This is going to be the most comprehensive and simple explanation of 2025 that you're going to get. So background, Project 2025 dates back to 1973. That's when the Heritage Foundation, a very powerful conservative think tank based in Washington, D.C., was founded. They are the writers and the architects of Project 2025.
In fact, Project 2025 was created by a conservative think tank named the Heritage Foundation.
It's supposed to make it illegal to be
homeless. Has
homeless.
nothing to do with Trump. Trump has neither endorsed nor supported this platform.
So Donald Trump is denying knowing anything about Project 2025, which, I mean, if you know anything about it and the people who are creating it, I mean, that's laughable. Not only did his press secretary do a promotional video for Project 2025, but one of, if not his top A, John McEntee, is behind it. And not too long ago, Donald Trump said this about the Heritage Foundation, which, as most of us are aware, is the foundation behind the Project 2025.
Your organization is named the Heritage Foundation because you understand that our glorious heritage is the foundation of everything we hope to achieve, which is why we need the help of the Heritage Foundation and everyone here tonight to get our tax cuts through the House.
Obviously the clip is cut off, but y'all get the gist. He needs the Heritage Foundation to do what he wants to do. And you know what? Speaking of the Heritage Foundation, why don't we just listen to what the CEO had to say himself?
We've been working with all of them on one project since soon after Joe Biden took the oath of office, before any conservative presidential candidates had even entered the race. As my friend and colleague Paul Dans before talked about briefly, our Project 2025 has developed a comprehensive policy agenda, but even more importantly, recruiting people, 20,000 people to go into the next administration, hopefully to help take back this country for you and for your audiences. We want no credit. We want the American people, if President Trump is elected again, President Trump and his administration, to take credit for that. But it will also be a great sign if all of this is successful, that in fact, as we know in our prayer time, but maybe not every time when we're watching the news, that the Lord is still smiling upon America.
Y'all heard that, right? Give the credit to Trump.
It is not a talking point of President Trump's campaign, nor is it something that he's interested in.
Because our country is going to hell. The critical job of institutions such as Heritage is to lay the groundwork, and Heritage does such an incredible job at that. And I'm telling you, with Kevin and the staff, and I met so many of them now, I took pictures with among the most handsome, beautiful people I've ever seen. I didn't like that picture. If you could lose that picture, please, would you, Kevin? But this is a great, no, he says I won't do that. But this is a great group, and they're going to lay the groundwork and detail plans for exactly what our movement will do and what your movement will do when the American people give us a colossal mandate to save America. And that's coming. That's coming.
Donald Trump can try to separate himself from Project 2025 all he wants. We all know he is largely behind it. He might not be the one creating every single policy, but if he wanted to, he could shut it down. But why would he when it would help him live out his dream of being a dictator?
Good grief. Trump said he has nothing to do with Project 2025. Just stop. Okay. I need to tell you something. Lean a little closer, all right? He is, wait for it, lying to you. Trump knows exactly who is involved in Project 2025. Here is a photo of him with the head of the Heritage Foundation, the current president of the Heritage Foundation, shaking hands with this person and talking about what a good job that they're doing. Here is a picture of Trump talking about and lauding the Heritage Foundation at a Heritage Foundation event in front of a screen for the Heritage Foundation. Here is a tweet from Trump back when he was allowed to tweet, when he wasn't banned for inciting violence and hate speech and election misinformation. Back when he was allowed to tweet, this was a tweet direct from him, again calling out the Heritage Foundation and the mandate for leadership by name. That was the one that he got when he became president in 2016, because this is a long established program that has been going on since the 80s. And he is just one of many Republican presidents that has partaken in receiving a mandate for leadership and determining, as part of his administration goals, whether or not he'll pursue any of their policies. By his own admission, the last time he was president, he enacted over 2/3 of the proposed policies in that mandate. You can also Google the mandate for leadership. You can find it. It's readily available. It's on the Project 2025 website. You can go through the table of contents and just look at who authored each chapter within the table of contents. A quick Google search of each of those authors will show you the direct links that they had to the previous Trump administration. Almost every single chapter is drafted by at least one person who was involved in the previous Trump administration.
And now we have 26 of 36 of the authors and editors listed in Project 2025's playbook were former Trump administration officials, transition officials, campaign officials, and you can't deny it. And if they wanted to hide it, maybe they shouldn't have listed all the authors and their titles right there in the table of content, right? So they have this undeniable tie to one another. We have Russell Vought, which I really want to point out you have here, Trump's former OMB director, self-proclaimed Christian nationalist. Not only is he responsible for Project 2025's first 180-day plan, he was just announced by the Trump campaign and the RNC as the RNC's policy director for their platform writing committee. So the only separation here is it's a fake one.
Here's a small sampling of people who are involved in authoring or pushing forward Project 2025. Donald Trump's HUD Secretary, Ben Carson. Donald Trump's aide, John McEntee. Chief of Staff of the Trump White House Personnel Management, Paul Dans. White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Legislative Affairs, Rick Dearborn. His Director of the Office of Management and Budget, Russ Vought. Acting Defense Secretary, Christopher Miller. Deputy Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, Ken Cuccinelli. Acting Director of the Bureau of Land Management, William Penley. Director of Policy Planning for the State Department, Kyron Skinner. I mean, the list goes on and on. These are people who, Peter Navarro, these are people who were directly involved in his administration. The fact that he can stand there and claim that he doesn't know who's behind Project 2025, when clearly he knows who's behind Project 2025, because more than 200 members of the Trump administration are behind Project 2025, goes to show that he recognizes the toxicity of this agenda, and he's just doing whatever he can to distance himself from it because he knows how dangerous it is, and he knows that Americans recognize how dangerous it is.
By the way, we're bringing back Tom Homan. We're bringing back all of the guys that did such a great job on the border.
They're in. They also have a growing list of staff members who are going to be tested to see if they are loyal to Trump and if they're willing to administer this in his potential administration. Now, according to Vox, many of the authors of Project 2025 are members of the first Trump administration who would likely have roles in the second. Now, mind you, Project 2025 is a whole 900-page document broken up into chapters. Roger Severino, the author of the Health and Human Services chapter, was the director of the HHS Office for Civil Rights under Trump. He ordered the removal of non-discrimination protections for LGBT Americans in healthcare settings. Gene Hamilton, the author of the Justice Department chapter, served in Trump's Department of Justice and Homeland Security. He worked on the zero-tolerance immigration policy that separated children from their parents at the border. And finally, according to reporting from The Week, former Trump staffers involved with Project 2025 include Trump's literal former White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, and again, Trump's former senior advisor, Stephen Miller, both of whom have been described as white nationalists. So when you say you don't know anything about it, is that like the time that you said that you never met Jeffrey Epstein and knew nothing about him?
And their main mission and goal is to move America to a more far-right Christian nationalist state. They originally came to prominence when they wrote their first manifesto in 1981 titled A Mandate for Leadership. And get this, those very same policies were the ones that were used and implemented in the Reagan administration. Seriously, around 60% of the 2,000 proposals written in the manifesto were implemented by Reagan. So now they're back again with a new edition, and this new edition is known as Project 2025. And it's supposed to provide guidance for the Don or whoever becomes the next Republican president. And these 900 pages and 30 chapters are written by professors, doctors, scientists, lawyers, scholars on each subject. And they've divided Project 2025 into 4 main pillars. The first is policy, which is this big book. The second is personnel. They're creating this huge conservative database, think LinkedIn, but for DJT loyalists. The third pillar is training. They set up this online educational system called the Presidential Administration Academy, where they teach their views and ideology in a course. And the fourth is called Playbook, which is an action game designed for how they're going to get everything done. Now let's get into some of the very concerning things on their wish list for DJT's second term. Starting off strong on pages 450 to 503, they're calling for a complete ban on abortion.
Abortion. On that note, abortion care would be inaccessible and illegal no matter where you live. Take it from them. On page 6 of its playbook, Project 2025 states, quote, "The Dobbs decision is just the beginning," end quote. People even in my district, the Massachusetts 7th, a leader in repro justice, would be criminalized for pursuing essential health care.
21% of all Medicaid recipients are Black. 30% of all Medicaid recipients are Hispanic or Latino. Project 2025 aims to reduce the amount of Medicaid funding in the Affordable Care Act, or what you call Obamacare, and implement work requirements for these programs, for Medicaid programs, while denying the use of this funding to doctors or medical institutions supporting women's right to choose nationwide. For our Black and brown homes like the one that I grew up in, with an amazing, strong, overworked, and overcommitted single mom, well, Project 2025 literally condemns the entire notion that any man will willingly disregard his responsibilities as a father. It's you, the mother, to blame. The document states that the policies and actions of the Department of Health and Human Services should prioritize married father engagement in its messaging, health, and welfare policies. Also, it says that TANF, or welfare money, should be redirected to promote marriage, healthy family formation, and delaying sex to prevent pregnancy. That's the focus of those efforts. And that child support in the United States should strengthen marriage as a norm, restore broken homes, and encourage unmarried couples to recommit to marriage.
Not very shocking. Page 319, they're saying the Department of Education should be eliminated. And in addition to calling for its elimination, they state that any school that requires a vaccine or mask mandate will not receive federal funding. Page 482, eliminate the Head Start program.
Roll the footage.
The Department of Education would be eliminated, cutting students off from civil rights protections and ending essential Title I funding for K through 12 schools. Project 25 not only calls for national book bans in schools, but also creates a list of banned words for the federal government that would be deleted from, quote, every federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant, and piece of legislation that exists, end quote. Here are just a few of the words on the list: diversity, gender, reproductive health, and of course, conservatives want to ban the word abortion.
Like, I don't think y'all really understand what's going on here. They really trying to cut funding for schools, K through 12 schools. Like, do y'all not understand Title I funding? Do y'all not know how many kids are going to be affected by that? Now, understand these are policies and priorities for the next conservative president.
The mandate outlines policy priorities for the next conservative president. Is that correct?
It does.
You've done a great job. I just want to let you know.
Y'all gotta listen. Y'all gotta understand what's going on here. They're trying to eliminate the entire Department of Education. The whole thing gone.
It calls for eliminating the Department of Education, eliminating the Department of Commerce.
Project 2025 recommends abolishing the Department of Education, whose programs would either be transferred to other government agencies or terminated. Scientific research would receive federal funding only if it suits conservative principles. Now, when I was trying to stress to y'all how bad it was with y'all kids not knowing shades, y'all was calling people trying to have me terminated. Now they trying to terminate the whole Department of Education. Are y'all calling them? Y'all calling up there? I just want to know. Y'all calling up there? I just want to know. Y'all, we got to do better by our kids. We have to do better by our kids because they're not trying to do better by our kids. They don't give a about our kids. The link is in the bio. Summer intensive curriculum coming out for 3rd through 8th grade next week. I'm telling you, y'all, we have to do better by our kids because they do not give a about our kids. I'm telling you, they trying to cut out the whole Department of Education. Don't get how these kids gonna learn. Who gonna teach them?
Project 2025 would change the focus of the Department of Justice, but it would eliminate the Department of Education. To be fair, this has been mentioned since the Reagan era. I've heard it said countless times, but I really didn't know what it meant. And this is what it means. It means the elimination of Pell Grants and subsidized loans. It means the end of student loan forgiveness and the end of funding for Title I schools. More than 76% of all K-12 Black students in the United States attend a public school. And of the 100% of Black students attending public schools, more than 70% of them attend a Title I school. A Title I school that receives federal funding that supports students who are coming from low-income families. Project 2025 would take those needed funds and give them directly to states to use as those states see fit. They could give that money to religious schools or private schools as vouchers.
Page 675, calling for the elimination of NOAA and the National Weather Service. Because these organizations, and I quote, have become one of the main drivers of climate change alarm industry and as such is harmful to the future U.S. prosperity. Page 133, they call for the complete dismantling of the Department of Homeland Security. In addition, they argue for the elimination of the FBI along with the Department of Justice.
The Department of Justice would go on a murdering spree. It would rush to use the death penalty and expand its use to even more people while circumventing due process protections.
Page 5, they call for a complete ban on corn, writing that corn should be outlawed, the people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned, and anyone else who participates or facilitates it should be registered. Page 104, reverse policies that allow transgender individuals to serve in the military. Gender dysmorphia is incompatible with the demands of the military service, and the use of public monies for transgender surgeries or to facilitate abortion for service members should be ended. And there's so much more, including the possibility of ending birthright citizenship, banning African American and gender studies in all levels of education, calling for an ending of any DEI programs, getting rid of gay marriage, ending the Affordable Care Act, and it also calls for the mass deportation of immigrants and proposes a plan to round up illegal migrants and lock them up and put them in camps. But perhaps one of the most troubling and well thought out plans is the move to reclassify federal workers under what is known as Schedule F. Now, I'm gonna get a little HR heavy, but please stick with me because it's so important. Now, there are two types of federal employees. The first group are merit-based workers. These are career positions. These people have earned them through going to school, getting work experience. They're either considered experts or they could be a part of the support staff. These people are hired because they know their stuff. Think an engineer at NASA or a scientist at the FDA. And their federal jobs have protections. Now, the other class are at-will or appointed workers. These employees tend to serve at the pleasure of the president or the administration, which basically means they can be fired or replaced at any time. To put it all in context, there are about 2 million of the first class of merit-based employees, and only about 4,000 political appointed ones. Under this new plan of Schedule F, they'd reclassify a bunch of the regular civil servants into political appointees. That way the Don can replace them with loyalists. Now, how does replacing all of these people help him carry out his plan? Let's do an example. Under Schedule F, DJT could take a scientist at the FDA, fire him, and then replace him with, let's say, a scientist who wouldn't give clearance to birth control or the abortion pill, therefore making it illegal and inaccessible without having to go through the courts, without having to go through Congress. By the way, they specifically lay this out in the plan in the 900 pages. Now, remember what I said about the whole conservative LinkedIn? That's the database they're going to use to fill these positions. A bunch of unqualified loyalists. And in October of 2020, actually, DJT tried to do this. He tried to implement Schedule F. He signed it into order, but then he lost in November. And the whole thing was pretty much a secret, but Biden then immediately repealed it. But if he wins this time, they say it'll be one of the first acts of his presidency. Now, the Don has come out and said he doesn't know anything about this Project 2025 and has been trying to distance himself from it. But at least 26 authors and people who are associated with Project 2025 served in his very own administration, including Russ Voigt, John McKinty, Stephen Miller, and many others. Also, his own platform, Agenda 47, just sounds like a SparkNotes version of Project 2025.
You may have heard of Project 2025, but this is from Agenda 47, and you can read all of these on his website. First, he promises that he will carry out the largest domestic deportation operation in history. He will also ask for the death sentence for anyone convicted of human trafficking. He will close the Department of Education and return all education standards to the states to decide. He will put prayer back into school, and he will criminalize any race-based advantage programs. He will end the Affordable Care Act. He will ban gender-affirming care for adults and children, and he will ban any federal dollars from going towards gender-affirming care, which means anyone with government-provided health care will no longer be able to access gender-affirming care except for Viagra and Cialis. Those will still be available. He will propose a constitutional amendment that gives a term limit to Congress. He will deploy the Department of Justice to investigate the Biden crime family and any of his adversaries or political rivals. He will immediately pardon all of the January 6thers, and he will create a task force to investigate anyone who arrested, charged, or imprisoned a January 6er. He will increase the penalties for underage criminal offenders, strengthen immunity for police officers, and deploy the National Guard to patrol woke cities. On day one, he will reassess our participation in NATO and says that every European country needs to pay the United States for protection. He will also restore the wonderful travel ban for Muslims coming to America. He will build freedom cities. This is 10 new cities built on federal land. He will award them to areas with the best development proposals, and he will prioritize moving young families to these freedom cities. He will kill all e-vehicles and e-vehicle legislation, seeking to replace that with the development of a flying car. He believes that we could create a car that vertically takes off. He will remove all of the limits on American natural gas exports and drill baby drill for oil domestically. He will impose a tariff of up to 60% on Chinese imports. He will extend the 2017 tax cuts and drop the corporate tax rate from 21% to 15%. He will push Congress to pass legislation that would give every American the right to concealed carry anywhere at any time. And he will revoke any gun restrictions or legislation that seeks to inhibit people's ability to own guns that's been passed in the last several years. He will demand that Europe pay back all the money we gave Ukraine, and then he will use all of that money to recruit for the American military. And he will take billions and billions of dollars from private university endowments by taxing, fining, and suing the universities. He specifically names Harvard in this one. And then he will use that money to create the American Academy. It is a free online college that will be free of wokeness that he will force employers to recognize as a bachelor's degree equivalent. So that's Agenda 47.
The president of the Heritage Foundation is calling Project 2025 the new American Revolution. The second DJT term could lead the way.
Project 2025 is nothing but a white supremacist manifesto to how they can delete anybody that ain't old, white, and male. That is all it is. It's about attacking diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's about attacking those that don't want to bow down to the orange Jesus and decide that they're going to be his loyalists and do whatever they want him to do. It's about getting rid of the Department of Education, getting rid of the Department of Justice, making everyone subscribe to the way that they understand and interpret Christianity, which I'm sure is the same Christianity that somehow justified slavery. That's why Trump had to go ahead and send that dog whistle about our black jobs. And I got news for him and anybody else. My black ass is exactly where I'm supposed to be, trying to check them and their white supremacy. So essentially what it is to destroy us and to destroy democracy. It also looks at consolidating power in the hands of the president. This is what we already see happening when we look at what the Supreme Court did when they decided that they were going to crown him King Trump and give him immunity that has never been warranted or given in this country. Warrants immunity that would allow him to literally kill somebody and get away with it. So that's Project 2025 in a nutshell. And don't forget your grannies and your aunties, because they're trying to take your Medicaid, Social Security, and Medicare.